this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin. Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. I've spoken extensively about my viewing habits relative to television and YouTube in particular, because that's really what I watch most of the time. And it shouldn't, I don't know, maybe it does surprise some people when I tell them that I don't watch true crime programs. It's not something I sit, it's like you do it a lot, which I do, and I'm not complaining. I love all of my colleagues that I work with, and I love discussing cases and the forensic aspects and those sorts of things. But if you're going to give me a choice between watching a history documentary and watching something having to do with a case, my mind needs a break. It really does, because you work at, you kind of work at this level where all these new cases are coming in. However, I will say we're right at the end of the semester at Jacksonville State. And as you know, I teach forensics. So I had a bunch of my students that came to me and said, Professor Morgan, have you watched the new JonBenet documentary? And I told them flatly, no, I haven't, and I really have no desire to watch it. Well, I told that to my wife, and she looked at me and she said, we need to watch it. I was like, oh. Okay. Well, we lay in our bed, and we've got this gigantic television that is in our room hanging off the wall. And so I have to look over my toes to watch TV. And we got into the first episode. And I'm not going to say I was riveted or fascinated, but I was at least mildly intrigued, because I really wanted to see this thing from the perspective of, is there a different narrative out there? Because Lord knows this tale has been told over and over and over and over again. And I came away with kind of a new understanding, and I got to give props where props are due, as kind of an adjacent here. My interest in this case has ebbed and flowed over the years. But after I watched the documentary, I came across an article that was written in BuzzFeed, and they broke this thing down into the 17 points of information that came out. And the article was written from the perspective of the author, who things that she never knew that were revealed to her. So I kind of wanted to get with my buddy Dave and break this down and talk a little bit about the background of the case and maybe a different perspective. Either way, we'll walk our way through it as best we can, because there's a lot to kind of analyze here. But I've got the best in the business to help me walk through it, my friend Dave Mack. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, I don't know who watched it first. I know that you watched it. I watched it. I don't know if that necessarily matters, but Kim and I watched it all in one sitting. Okay, which is hard for me to do. It really is. It's like, hang on, I need a break. But we sat there and we watched every episode, because it's like when I get breaks in time, if I don't do something in the immediate, it ain't going to get done. And I'm bad to watch television stuff and never finish it. There's only a few things that I'll watch all the way to the conclusion. as far as series goes. And it's just, it's just one of those things that I knew that I had to sit there and make my way through it. And some stuff I already knew to a great degree. I've been covering the autopsy report for years and years now. But what was your takeaway, if you will, after, your kind of gut reaction to it after watching this thing?
To be very honest, I've avoided a lot of the coverage just because it has been done so much, and there's been so much written as fact that turned out to be fiction about the case of JonBenet Ramsey and her murder. And there are parts of this case that have always bothered me, like they have millions of others, that I haven't devoted time to watching anything new. But for some reason, when this thing popped up on Netflix, I watched it. I was amazed at a few things I didn't know. One of the biggest things I found out was about the actual layout of the house. That was kind of surprising to me. We'll get into that. But just to give you an idea, a little review. You and I, just being the age we are, we've been covering this case for a long time. Okay, I actually found out in talking to some of the people on our show, on the Nancy Grace show, some of the newer employees that are professionals and do a great job. They don't remember it. They only know it as JonBenet Ramsey, a little girl was killed, and they never solved it. They don't remember the case like you and I do. Like many of you listening to this podcast, you remember how it was covered. Younger people don't. That's how old this case is.
And let me tell you this is what's so fascinating about what I said earlier, is the fact that none of my students were born when this case happened. I mean, just think about that. It's kind of like it's kind of like if when we were kids, if we in college and we started asking maybe if we had a professor of forensics or police science or whatever, we'd say, well, tell us about the Black Dahlia case.
Mm-hmm.
Well, nobody, I guess there's still people alive that had an attachment to the Black Dahlia case. They'd be ancient by now. But, what is it about this case that continues to resonate, and that my college students at my little college have an interest in this?
It's been 28 years. We're coming up on the 28th anniversary.
Yeah, the day after Christmas in 1996, Dave.
And that's the thing. So December 26, 1996, 5:52 a.m., Patsy Ramsey calls 911 to report her daughter missing from the home that they lived in. And there's a ransom note. Ransom notes oftentimes do not occur like this. They rarely are very long, and they most assuredly are not written at the place of the kidnapping, because the individuals committing the kidnapping want to kidnap the individual and get out of the premises so they don't wake anybody else that could stop them. They don't sit down at the bar and start writing out a long note and practicing it. So there were things about this case that immediately drew attention. But again, you've got a little girl, and I believe one of the reasons this JonBenet Ramsey case got coverage the way that it did, one is that it happened during what is usually a slow news time between Christmas and New Year's. People are at home, they're on vacation, or they're off for the holidays with extra time. And so there's not a lot of news breaking. And this did. And as you had families together for the holidays, they focused in on this little girl. But
holy smokes, I had not thought it. Only a news guy would come up with that. Because for me, I didn't. I'm just having this moment right now, and I guess other people have thought about it. It's not something. My brain's not wired like yours is. I mean,
probably not a bad
because
thing.
If you, but no, what I'm saying, brother, is that you know what it's like to be at a radio station, television station during the holidays. Everything is kind of put on autopilot, isn't it?
It's a skeletal shift. And when you've got a news story like this, that people come in, this is a story that got attention because of the videos that existed of the little girl. You have to remember, whenever a story is told on television, in particular on news, there has to be what is called B-roll. That is footage of the individual that runs while the newscasters are reporting what took place. Well, oftentimes you don't have a lot of video.
No.
You have still pictures, especially of children, you have family pictures and things like that. But in this particular case, you had the specter of a little girl who was made up to look like a young woman. And to be honest with you, in some of the videos on stage, they were sexualized pictures of little girls. And that was part of the attraction of the case. It was almost like the freak show, the sideshow. Here's you have little girls dressing up and doing routines. You've got the cowgirl. You've got the dinner party. You've got all these different looks in the hair, the makeup, and all of that going into it. And every time they told the story, they had video to run. They had new video to run of JonBenet Ramsey. That's why the case got the attention that it did, because there was so much video of this little girl. You're seeing her on stage, and then you find out she was murdered the day after Christmas.
Yeah. Well, first off, I remember, because I was working with the ME in Atlanta when this went down. Of course, we've got our own cases that we're dealing with. Boulder, Colorado might as well have been on Mars for me, from just a practitioner standpoint. And, I'd had cases involving little kids that had gotten brutally killed over the years. And I guess when I compare it professionally, I'm thinking it's a tragedy. I'm sad that it happened. But the thing that kind of always infuriated me about the case is that I had kids that were killed and never made it through one or two news cycles.
Right.
And the cynic in me always said, well, yeah, the kids that you had that never made it through one or two news cycles, they were lower socioeconomic kids. There was not that whatever that weird aura around the case was, relative to that. They're soon forgotten. Unless you've got family that just stays on it, and they're begging, they're pleading, for help, it's going to disappear, out of the news cycle. And that didn't happen here. And then there's that salacious aspect. One more confession I have to make here is that the first time that I remember seeing the videography of JonBenet in life at these things, the pageant things, I'd never seen anything like it in my life. I was shocked. I think a lot of people were, and it takes quite a bit to shock me, but I saw it and I was like, dude, this is like bordering on like soft porn, in a way. And it was, I found it, I hate the word offensive because people use that. It shocked me, I think, to a great degree, because I'm just thinking, okay, you've got a young girl walking around with all of this makeup on her face and the hair done up, and she's in a bathing suit in public amongst all of these. And I had to assume that it wasn't just like fellow competitors that were in the room. There were going to be other people, and you've literally got all of these people that are there. I would assume that people could walk in off the street, or you donate to something. You never know who's going to be in a room like that, Dave.
And it's ripe for predators. One thing that came out of the JonBenet Ramsey murder and investigation was, all of a sudden, there was this huge spotlight on these beauty pageants for children. And while they did exist, it wasn't something a lot of people knew about because, well, it's expensive. You mentioned the socioeconomic group of some of the individuals you were talking about that didn't even make it through two news cycles. Well, imagine here, now we've got rich people who are tarting up their own little girls, putting them on stage, and it's expensive to do. They travel, they do lessons, they have choreographers and singing teachers and all that. I mean, there is a whole business built up around this. And I believe after the death of JonBenet Ramsey after the coverage of her murder that the television show Toddlers and Tiaras
Yes.
I believe that was born out of that. And
yeah, it took off like a rocket ship.
because that show was launched in 2009. I looked it up.
Yeah, I'm glad you did, because I got to tell you, I was Kim and I, in the wake of all of that with JonBenet, because by the time that show premiered, and I think it was like, I don't know, I can't remember what network it was on. Was it Discovery or something? I have no idea, but
TLC.
Yeah, TLC, and and I was thinking about how obscene I'd found it earlier. And I'm not a prude, don't get me wrong, but we're talking about babies here.
Yeah.
And the fact that this was going on, and that there was and you had other things that came down the pike after that.
But you got to remember, a show becomes a hit when it has a star, when it has a breakout star, whether in this case with Honey Boo Boo came out.
I was about to say the same thing.
Toddlers and Tiaras. She was the star, and her mom, they all made that and got their own show. And going back to JonBenet Ramsey now, that was our first peek behind the curtain. I didn't know anything about those pageants until I knew there were pageants for kids. I did. At the local level, you'll have them, at your local gym or whatever, where, and the girls go up there, but I didn't know it was a whole industry built up around it.
I mean, you've always had these pageants like, Little Miss 4th of July or something like that, and little girls kind of parade out there and that sort of thing, and somebody's selected. But no, this is a different level. You're not. I don't know how to describe it, and I'm probably wrong for even attempting to. But it's like, I don't know. Are you trying to get your kid to get a sponsorship? To sell items? Is there a way that you're going to cycle back into this so that you're making money? Because it goes to this idea that you have to be really wealthy to do this. The extent, all of the lessons. Look, my kids took dance lessons, and just that in and of itself is very expensive, and it's a commitment. We're not talking about simply dance, Dave. We're talking about performance. We're talking about vocal lessons. We're talking about the ability to go out and strut about on a stage, and then a child's ability to, you've got some guy in a tuxedo, which is kind of creepy to me too, with the televangelist hair, and he's standing there in the tuxedo, and he's got the microphone, and he's asking these little girls questions, that sort of thing. And it's this huge production. I don't know. It was very odd to me, the whole set of circumstances. And so from an investigative perspective, when this thing, you begin to peel the onion here, my mind automatically goes to that. And I think probably I'm sure a lot of people, because I've talked to other people in law enforcement investigations who kind of had the same opinion that I did, that who could have been occupying those spaces in those audiences that would want to harm a young girl like this? Who is it that's out there that would have done this? Who would have the nerve to do it? Who would have been able to plan something like this? And what even made it even more chilling is that in a town like Boulder, that's not a gigantic place, you still had out there somewhere someone that had the intestinal fortitude to go into a home and take a little girl out of her bed, then into the basement where she is assaulted and choked out with a cord with a highly complex knot.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
So, Dave, as you remember, you and I made the trip up to Nashville back in May 2024, where we went to CrimeCon.
Oh, yeah.
And we've been to a couple of them together now. We did Orlando, then we've done Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And Dave, I had something happen. Orlando was pretty amazing, because of the Idaho case.
Oh, wow.
And speaking, but I had something that was equally amazing, and it kind of came out of the blue, both of these, while I was at CrimeCon in Nashville back in May. First off, I got asked by Ashley Banfield if I would join her on for an interview. And just so folks understand, when you do things in media, you develop relationships with certain people, certain presenters. I love that about the British. They use the term presenter with certain presenters. And if you are reliable in what you do, they'll call you to do other things. And so Ashley's people reached out to me and asked me if I would join her, for an interview. And then as I approached, I looked over and I saw Catherine Ramsland, who I've known Catherine for a long time. We've actually been on panels before at Duquesne University, where Dr. Cyril Wecht was. And they wanted me to talk about serial killers. Well, Catherine, as you can imagine, doesn't say anything about Idaho because Kohberger went to school there. Doesn't mean that she, has some kind of inside knowledge, but she wants to stay clear of that, as I can imagine.
But just to be very clear on Ramsland, BTK was her big thing, but she also was a teacher at the college where Kohberger attended in Pennsylvania, and they do know one another, which is why she stays out of Idaho. Just
listen, I can't blame her. I wouldn't touch that with a vaccinated crowbar if I were her. She'd be wise to stay away from it. And I think that she's a pretty bright lady, and she's exercised that to this point. So it's tough to be in that position. I can't imagine, because everybody's after her for an interview. So I sat down and we didn't talk about Kohberger. We talked about something else relative to serial killers with Ashley Banfield. That same day, I got asked to join a panel that night. And again, I was surprised, Dave, because on that panel, I found myself seated next to John Ramsey. I've never met the man. I never have. So that panel was with Court TV. It was myself, Julie Grant, and Vinnie Politan. And here I am. And immediately, I sent you the picture. I think I did just a while ago.
Amazing.
And I'm immediately, John Ramsey is immediately to my right. And so, I talked to him directly, not before the thing, but during the interview process, and spoke to him and, and talked about, the possibility of DNA playing into the resolution in his daughter's homicide case. I was kind of shocked when that happened. I had no idea that some kind of documentary was going to be coming out. But, just reflectively, you have these little moments in time that kind of, present themselves. Did I tell you, Dave? I don't remember. Again, my kind of a weird connection. The night that she died, I was on duty at the ME's office as an investigator, and we started getting phone calls from all over the country. And it was, we had calls coming in from New York, Fox, obviously CNN, which was in Atlanta at the time, doesn't exist anymore. And then local news media. They wanted to know information about her death. And the thing about it is it wasn't reported because she's a hospice patient. So that's how we found out that she had passed away.
Okay, so wait a minute. if you're in hospice care, it doesn't get reported like a normal death would.
The hospice nurse handles everything, soup to nuts. They already know that you have terminal diagnosis, so you go into hospice care. And so the hospice nurse actually winds up signing the death certificate, which is kind of an interesting little thing that takes place. And everything is pre-prepared, funeral services and all that stuff. And it's not even reportable, to the coroner or the medical examiner in many jurisdictions. It certainly wasn't in Atlanta. So we started getting this call. So I've had these kind of weird little involvements with the case. I appeared on a program in CNN when Como was still there, and we taped for an entire day, and that was actually in response to. Do you remember the thing that CBS did? Mm-hmm. And they wound up getting sued for
where they pointed the finger at the brother.
Yeah, they wound up getting sued for like $700 million or something, and they had to know that was coming. But CNN did a thing. They asked me to be on a panel with that, and I was with a guy that's one of the responding officers. He's retired now, an elderly gentleman, and then a writer and a reporter that day. And I remember sitting there and talking about DNA with Como all those many years ago. When that case actually happened, they actually flew me up to New York to tape that thing. So I've had these kind of weird little peripheral things that have gone on. It's not a case that I have necessarily sought out. As a matter of fact, it's one of those things that I've kind of fled from because of I think the biggest thing for me is knowing what I know of the dead, and how I've always felt that there was a real disservice on the part of the media about these other cases that are out there with these people that don't have these kinds of means, and their precious little angel gets killed, and they don't get the same coverage. I always found that I think, at one point in time, I think there's probably more now, but I think at one point in time I'd done a count. It's like, there's been like 26 different books at one point in time that were written about JonBenet. That number's probably gone up by this point in time. I'm thinking, how much can you say? How much?
Well, you got to remember that there were so many odd things taking place. You had the wealthy family that seems to have it all. They have the money, they have the means, and then they have the sidebar thing of doing the toddlers and doing the kiddie pageant shows. And I mean, that's an odd little thing anyway. And then, of course, you have a child that you have the 911 call with the ransom note, Joe. That in and of itself is going to be an eye catcher, because now we have hold of it. How many times do we do stories where a child is kidnapped or taken and murdered, and we don't have a note? We don't have anything. We have this child was in this place and now they're not. Even in the case of his name's Mark Class, Polly Class's dad. Yeah. When Polly was stolen out of her bedroom in the middle of the night, right? And there was no ransom note left. And it got a lot of coverage because nobody believed him. Everybody thought he was lying. No child gets stolen in the middle of the night from a slumber party. This guy's obviously dead, and I always felt bad for Mark Class because of the way that was covered. But this case, Joe, the JonBenet Ramsey case, has not been covered in that way. There have been certainly people pointing fingers, but you don't hear it. You don't hear it the way you would think. Look, man, we've got a 6-year-old that is kidnapped allegedly the night of, on December 26th. The phone call comes in before 6 a.m. They're up and packing to go on a trip. They had a planned trip to go to visit family up in Michigan, I believe.
Yeah, it was Michigan. Yeah.
And things I learned from watching this Netflix special that we were talking about. But Joe, let's just start with, there were 17 detailed facts that this reporter was talking about, new things. There's things they were unaware of about the JonBenet Ramsey case. I found it fascinating too. And it's the first one talking about the 911 call that Patsy Ramsey makes about her daughter being kidnapped and the ransom note. I really have problems with both. I didn't believe her 911 call at all. Even now, all these years later, I listen to it and I still don't believe it, because it doesn't make sense from what you and I have. based on history, based on the stories we've covered, it doesn't make sense from this very beginning. Does it to you?
Well, it is certainly bizarre, I'd have to say. And I think in addition to that, when police do arrive out there, it's not from Jump Street, and that's where everything. That's where it's at that moment in time. You're either going to meet with success or you're going to meet with failure at that point in time, and the police, to their everlasting discredit, they did the worst thing that you can possibly do. They treat it like it is actually a kidnapping, or what they believe is. How many kidnappings do the Boulder Police Department handle with notes? Just let that sink in just for a second. So if somebody is trying to feed you information, okay, and you're gullible enough to buy into that, if you don't have any kind of experience, if you don't walk in assuming that everybody in the location is guilty to begin with, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a problem. And when they got there, I love the phraseology here because, in the author's point, she actually alludes to the fact that, and this was her phraseology, that this retired police officer stated, "We did a cursory search." What? You did
a cursory search of the house, Joe?
Yeah, no. If you're telling me you've got a 6-year-old that has been kidnapped, dude, it ain't going to be a cursory search. I'm flipping beds over. I'm looking everywhere, because if I'm asking family, where did you look? How, and what is this place, this weird house that you live in? It's so oddly designed it's got like a butler's entrance and a staircase, an adjacent staircase that kind of winds around in all these funky ways and everything. Where is it that you've looked?
The reason it's like that, and the house was added onto, it was built and then it was added onto over a period of time, which gave it a really odd feel. But it also gives me something else, Joe, because of the odd nature of the structure, because of the staircases going in different areas and rooms not part of the plan. Since it was all, you would have to know your way around this house to actually be able to find where you're going to get the child, to find your way back out, all the while trying not to wake everybody up. Kind of important to know your way around a house. And to be honest with you, even now, after looking at it, looking at diagrams and everything else that I've seen in the daylight, I still could not find my way to there. It's flowers for Algernon, man. I would not beat the mouse on that maze.
No, there's no way. I could not. I could not make my way through this place. Even when I had top mental acuity, when I was a younger guy, being able to kind of make my way around, because it is like a maze in there, Dave. You've got all these odd twists and turns. You've got points of entrance and exit. And it would seem as though that whoever was involved in this case, and I'm talking about the perpetrator, would have to have a very specific knowledge of how, the groundwork is kind of laid out here, because it's not something you just kind of blind. Listen, if you live in a 60s ranch style home, like many of us do, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to kind of navigate your way through one of those homes. It's a box, all right, and you've got a central hallway that other rooms, exit off of. That ain't what we're talking about here. We're talking about multiple floors. You've got multiple ways to access these floors. And then once you even arrive at the floor, it seems disorienting in that environment as well. So yeah, for me, it was that's an odd bit of it's an odd bit of information coming in. And then just going back just for a second about this so-called cursory evaluation at the scene. How is it that, you can justify looking for a 6-year-old, but yet you're not ripping this place to shreds to try to see if she could be anywhere else. Is it simply based upon this note that has been left that I think was found on one of the treads of the staircase immediately adjacent to the kitchen? For me, I'm not going to believe anything my lying eyes, as Nancy says, my lying eyes are telling me. I have to physically explore the space and try to understand it, because like it or not, that house, even if it is a kidnap location and it's not a homicide, Dave, this is a crime scene. This is a crime scene and should be managed in the same way as if you had multiple homicide in there, because every bit of particulate evidence that might be in there, and to further exacerbate the situation, the family was not removed from the house. Not only, let me double down on that, not only were they not removed, they invited friends over. They invited friends over to this location during this time. And listen, I know everybody needs support, and I know that everybody, you're grieving and you're worried, and, there's another place that can be done. You need to release this environment, or the police need to take control of the scene. And one of the first things that you do, this is like crime scene investigation 101. You remove everybody that has nothing to do with this case out of that environment. You might allow them to grab a coat, but you go with them as they're grabbing a coat. Give me the keys, because at this point, the family's not necessarily under suspicion. You know that this is a central point. They've called it in. Their child is missing. So you don't necessarily, this is an interesting question. Do you need a warrant at this point in time to search the house? I'm thinking probably not, because this is why. If this is a kidnapping, you're not looking at this from the perspective of a homicide scene, and this is the one difference. Now, this comes down to child welfare. This is an emergent situation. You're doing everything you can in order to try to find this child that might be in this massive home. And listen, I don't know that everybody out there fully appreciates how big this thing is and how complex it is, Dave.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
She was assaulted. She's got this rather ghastly injury. You think about the injuries certainly to her neck, but just so that for those that haven't read her autopsy report, I'll go ahead and kind of give you the thumbnail. They list this as craniocerebral trauma, which means that you have the cranium, okay, the skull itself. And then as a result of the cranium being fractured, this travels through to the brain, the cerebral, okay, or the cerebrum. So it's this is how it's kind of laid out. Let me lay this out for all of our friends. So it's subsection Roman numeral 2 is craniocerebral injuries. Subsection A, scalp contusion, which means there's an overlying bruise, okay, of the scalp. And then B, there's a linear comminuted fracture of the right side of the skull. C, linear pattern contusions of the right cerebral hemisphere. Okay, so what they're saying is that this underlying contusion on the surface, the right aspect, if you'll put your fingertips, go to the top of your head, move them slowly down directly above, superior to your right ear, That's where this insult is going to be. So right cerebral hemisphere. She's got a subarachnoid and subdural hemorrhage. So subdural, the dura is the sac that our brain floats around in. And for those that have never seen a dura, I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks a lot like a placenta in my mind. And it's the brain stays contained within the dura sac, and it's essentially the brain is bathed in cerebral spinal fluid. Okay, and it also acts as a shock absorber. So if you bounce your head off of something, your brain is not merely bouncing off of these bony walls of your skull. Okay, so you've got this sac that's fluid filled that your brain is contained inside of the hard outer shell of your skull. So she's got a subdural hemorrhage, which means that's beneath the dura and the brain. And then you have a subarachnoid, and the arachnoid surface is actually the inner surface of your brain. So this hemorrhage translates, it goes into the brain, essentially. And then she's got small contusions to the tips of the temporal lobes, which means the temporal lower, below the top of the head, where your temporal bone is. So there was contusion in there as well, Dave. So this is a very nasty injury that she sustained. It would have been a tremendous amount of force that she was subjected to with whatever this object is. And they never really came up with a solid answer about what had generated this. And yeah, I guess you could look at it and say that there's a potential that a mag light, and if you're not familiar, back in 96, they had mag lights. I wish I still had one, that are massive, and the cops stopped carrying them. And do you want to know why cops stopped carrying them? Cops carried them because they can be used as a bludgeoning device, and it's very convenient. So if you're having a fight with a prisoner or suspect, there's one particularly infamous case out of, and I can't remember the guy's name to save my life, out of Detroit. And this guy was literally what we used to refer to as being brained. He was brained by a cop with this mag light. And I could get that guy's name, but there was a major lawsuit that resulted from that case, and that involved a mag light. He was beaten with a flashlight, and it creates a really nasty injury. And he was beaten multiple times. He had, his skull or his scalp was literally split open in multiple locations because of lacerations that, and then he had all these communicating injuries at work. So you think about in 96, that type of flashlight existed back then. And apparently the Ramseys had one in their home. What else could generate this kind of insult? Well, I guess if you're thinking cylindrical, the first thing that pops to mind for me could be like maybe a baseball bat, that would generate this kind of energy. The thing about it is that with mag lights, depending upon how it's utilized, if you look down the shaft of an old mag light, it's actually textured. It's got almost a diamond pattern to it. And when you strike a surface like the skin with a mag light or anything that's textured, it actually translates that pattern to the overlying skin. So you would shave the hair, and we shave the hair in the morgue, and we take pictures of these things, of these little insults, because it physically connects this event, with all that's left behind with a case like this, Dave.
Unbelievable. I had no idea. I really didn't. Now, I'm trying to, for a case that has gone on for 28 years that we still don't have an answer. We now have the Boulder Police Department that has been, rightly so, run over the coals. They did a horrible job from the very beginning. Everything about the setup was wrong from the 911 call until today. You cannot make up for what they did in the first hours of this case. I don't know how you could ever get, based on what happened with her body, Joe. And the common sense factor, I learned early on that you have to take that out. That it's just facts. It's not what you think. It's not what you think you might have had. You actually have to have real facts. So I can think all day long that Patsy Ramsey sat at the kitchen table and wrote that note and practiced it and wrote it. If I can't prove it, I can't bring that up against her. I get that.
It's not that. Yeah, that supposition is not worth the gunpowder to blow it to hell unless you can prove
Right.
it.
And now we've got the strangling and we've got the destruction of her skull to this little 6-year-old child.
Yeah.
What about the DNA, Joe? There's got to be DNA in here that somehow tells us somebody other than the Ramseys had something to do with this, right?
Yeah, there is foreign DNA, and they did swabs, obviously on both. The occupants of the home. I don't. Here's the thing. I don't know. I really wonder if. First off, okay. Here's something I want to throw out to you, man. Do they have the names of everyone that was in that home?
Wow, probably not.
I mean that. You're talking about. We're going to have cookies, leftover cookies, Christmas cookies, and coffee while we're sitting around. And here's another thing. Let's just say, and this is one of the biggest things relative to DNA, and they talk about destruction of DNA. If you've got a group of people that are hovering about, you know what people like to do when they get stressed out, Dave? I know I do. Particularly if I can't go out and go for a walk, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to eat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to eat. I'm going to drink coffee. I'm going to sit around, wring my hands, talk to myself, talk to other people. They went into that kitchen.
Right.
What if that note was written in the kitchen, which some people claim that it was? Well, now you're introducing foreign DNA into this environment, and you might be eradicating anything else that's there. I want everybody right now to think about the position you get in when you write something on a hard surface. Do you stand? Do you sit upright as you write and just merely extend your hand and write something down? No, you don't do that. You know what you do? You lean.
Yep.
You lean. Even the oldest images that we have of scribes, you think about the monks that are translating the Bible. You remember those images, those beautiful images that they'll have of the monks, and they're sitting there and they're at their table and they've got their quill and they're writing. They're leaned over in very poor writing conditions and they're generating this beautiful calligraphy. You lean when you write. If you even go to the bank, our younger listeners are not going to remember this, but you and I, you go to the central desk there that's got that attached pen that never works.
Right.
And you've got a deposit slip. What do? Well, you lean if you're right-handed, generally you'll lean your left arm on the table. You'll put your left hand on the surface of what you're writing, secure it in place. Then with your right hand, and of course it would be the reverse of this, but you're writing like this. There's multiple points of contact along this. So just for me, thinking about an individual being in this environment, and you've got people coming in and they're eating Christmas cakes and cookies and drinking coffee. How long did they indwell that space? Was everybody's DNA collected that had anything to do with that environment? I don't know. And then even if you do collect it, are these, and I'm doing air quotes here, friends, are these true friends that you would have over, I don't know, maybe you guys all played canasta once a week together. I have no idea. Y'all got together.
Right.
Is there going to be a significant deposition? Yeah, I know. I just pulled them out of the air. Jen, I don't know. Sorry. We'll say sorry.
Yeah.
I have to play sorry with my grandkids all the time.
Or the game of life.
The game of life. I hate that game.
Playing it every day.
But anyway, I'm playing it every day, baby. You think about that environment in there, and was it possible that people could have come in there? Again, this goes back to our earlier comments about securing the scene, brother.
It's all trash.
Securing the scene, which is all toxic. It's miserable failure.
Yeah.
When you think about that, here's another thing. I really wonder, thinking about contact DNA and there's other areas I kind of want to explore with this, but I was thinking about contact DNA. Let's say you're not gloved. You're not gloved. And I don't care if you're talking about carrying a 6-year-old. These stairs look really steep to me. Okay. So as you're progressing down this twisting staircase and all of this sort of thing, and you're toting the body of a child, you have to maintain your balance. Are there handrails leading down to the basement?
Right.
Well, we know that there's doorknobs. Remember, They talked about the one door was locked. Cops went to it. It was locked. They didn't try to get into it. Remember that? That was early on in this thing. Yeah. So that means that there are doorknobs that would have been touched.
Wow.
Were those doorknobs collected? Were the doors collected? I've collected doors before.
Really?
Oh yeah. I help with it. You know, I've helped take doors down.
You've got the entire area from her bedroom to where her body was found.
Yeah.
And every possible way to get there, all would have to have been checked, should have been checked for. Good grief. Okay.
And
let's move on.
Listen, and you can't, not you, the universal you cannot make the argument that, well, it was a different time.
No.
We didn't know what we know about DNA. That's a load of crap. You know, I tell you what we did know about. We knew about fingerprints. So if you even at a rudimentary level, if you treated this as if DNA did not exist and you're looking for latent prints, which you and I can both agree on the fact that was always our fallback position early on prior to DNA. We always look for fingerprints. Who touched those doorknobs in that location? Who touched the rails? Were there foreign prints associated with anybody that could have entered into that environment? I mean, I think that's a simple question that should be asked and certainly should be answered, you know, for me at least. All the possible points, because we think about points of contact. And one of the best examples I can give to people relative to looking for latent prints, and I do this exercise with my students. They feel so foolish when they do it. I take a little bit of sadistic pride in it, but I'll set up a chair in front of the classroom, and I'll pick one student, and it has to be a student that owns a car. And I'll say, demonstrate to us how you get in the car. And I'll critique them about how they get in the car and then what they do when they get in the car. Or I will also throw out a scenario. You're getting in your friend's car. What do you do to get into their car? And you would not believe how many points of contact there are just getting into a motor vehicle.
Right.
That the places you have to touch, because most of us don't think about that. If you've got like a low sports car, for instance, you literally have to swing yourself inside the car. People don't think about grabbing the roof or grabbing the interior handle, because most people don't want to just free fall into a seat.
Right.
So you brace yourself. Same principle here. If you're carrying an unconscious child or even a dead child at this point in time, you're going to have to balance yourself regardless of how light this individual might be. Okay. So just fingerprint evidence. And then of course we can go to the next level and talk about DNA. What was secured? That's the big question. That's what this all comes down to.
Right.
What was secured at that point? I don't know who did this, but I know that there was a catastrophic failure when it comes to security of the scene.
Well, you know, when in talking about DNA, Joe, a lot of us followed the O.J. Simpson trial, and all of the testimony about DNA, we learned a lot. I say we as a people, you know, the population learned a lot about DNA. We learned a lot about what can be done with DNA. And in the time after the trial, it was a regular occurrence on TV shows dealing with police working detectives about DNA. This happened 2 years after. All of the DNA stuff became a matter of public record in the American population. I mean, O.J. Simpson, his trial ended in 1995. But the whole thing here is that regardless of all of that, we have a child who was taken from her bedroom, was beaten, strangled, and her dead body was left behind. Then a ransom note that's a short novel is left behind, asking for a very specific amount of money that amounted to John Ramsey's bonus that year. We have police on the scene from the 911 call from Patsy Ramsey, the mother, and yet nobody bothers to secure the scene. Nobody stops new people from coming in. Nobody searches the entirety of the house. And then after hours of being on site, the police person responsible for the scene says, "Hey, John, why don't you take a friend? Y'all go look and see what you can find. See if there's anything missing from this house." And John Ramsey goes directly to his daughter's body. He then destroys any evidence that was left behind by picking her up and carrying her, and in front of everybody, laying her down in the living room, I think.
Yeah, he did. And when you say destroy, neither one of us are actually saying he purposed to destroy.
Oh,
them.
no.
It's just the fact that anytime you touch any surface on a body like this, you're going to compromise it. And of course, that's one of the big problems. Compromised evidence, compromised physical evidence, the inability to suss this thing out, load these many years later. And I can tell you this, the further down the road that we go, the more complex this gets. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.